Welcome, the Bee Gees.
The Bee Gees.
Once again, the fabulous Bee Gees.
The most exciting sound in the world.
The biggest grossing album in the history of music.
Has the enormous success changed your lives?
Well, I was speaking to one of my friends the other day, and as he was cleaning my shoes, I said, listen.
A look there at the new HBO documentary, The Bee Gees, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? And joining us now is the film's director, Frank Marshall. Great to have you on the show with us today.
Good morning. Nice to be here. Thanks.
You know, Frank, I saw the documentary Friday night.
We both did. It was amazing.
Yeah, we both did, and it was amazing. And, you know, I was sort of a rock snob, and at that point in my life, I was listening to three things, like the Beatles, the Beatles solo albums, and Beatle bootlegs. And so I did not appreciate the Bee Gees, like, dominating everything. I will tell you, the further I got away from it, and after watching your documentary, it confirmed what I really knew all along. They were extraordinary, gifted songwriters, first of all. But what you showed us was how they really changed the history of music by what they experimented with inside the studio. They were just a one of a kind musical force.
Yeah, I think what's important to understand is, even myself, I thought they were kind of lightweights back then, and it turns out they're really heavyweights. And they're really gifted, and it was their songwriting that touched everybody, and their ability to reinvent themselves when they ran into these challenges and the ups and downs of being a pop superstar.
Well, and you really saw through this that they were an artist in the greatest sense of the word, like Lennon and McCartney, like Jagger and Richards, and also, you know, we even say like Burt Bacharach. I mean, great songwriters like that, because they had their first phase, they broke up, then they came back, they had their second phase, then they came out with Jive Talking. I remember buying the single and I'm like, okay, wait a second, the Bee Gees, what's going on here? Then Nights on Broadway. And as McCartney always said, some of the most remarkable things he ever did in the studio happened by accident. Here, Nights on Broadway, Barry starts this crazy falsetto, and everybody's like blown away, going, oh my God, what are you doing? And music literally changes at that moment, pop music.
Yeah, he had no idea he could do it. And Arif Martin, his producer, asked him, you know, can you do something there at the end, kind of, you know, to take us out? And he tried this falsetto, and he changed music, as you said.
So let's hear that part of the documentary that you guys were just discussing, Discovering the Falsetto. Let's take a look.
It became another icon of the Gibbs. Everybody knew when you heard that falsetto, that's the Bee Gees.
When we sing songs like, you know how easy it is to hurt me, it's Barry and Robin singing in unison. But they mesh together so well that it sounds like one voice. But it's a different voice from them separately.
It's delivered with such delicacy, and the message in the lyrics was what guys should say, didn't say, couldn't say for whatever reasons. It's the kind of music you might have bought and given to your girlfriend. But that's what was special about them.
Main Course became a turning point for us. Dennis Bryan on drums, and Blue Weaver, and Alan Kendall. That became our band.
One of their best qualities was adaptability. In many ways, they were chameleons of pop.
The way they changed and the groove they got into there was so profound. if that was something that was initiated by me, I can't think of any. That one of the great things I've done in my life. I'll take full credit.
And Clapton takes full credit,
So
of
good.
course. He gets them down to Miami. Of course, any rock fan knows about the place he went in Miami to clean up, and he basically told them, "Hey, I was at the end of my career, and then I went to this place in Miami, and everything changed. You guys should do it too." That's exactly what they did, Frank. Talk about Miami, because Clapton really does play a big part in this story of sort of refocusing them and saying, get down there, get away from everything, find yourselves again.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, the sort of spontaneity, serendipity of all of this. It's not planned. It's, somebody makes a suggestion. They were hanging out together. They were both at RSO Records under Stigwood. And Eric said, I've kind of found myself at this place, 427 Ocean Boulevard, which is the cover of his album. And you ought to go over there. America's great, and you might have some, discover something new there. And so they all moved there. And then, magic happened. And it was that ability to adapt and be flexible and just catch that, whatever that wave was of creativity. And then they recorded Main Course, and they were off and running again.
So, Frank, I'm curious, they were on top of the world, obviously, in 1977 with Saturday Night Fever. No one was bigger in that moment. But the fall came pretty quickly. 2 years later, you've got Disco Demolition Night at Comiskey Park, where fans run onto the field and basically start a riot, burning disco records. And it seems they sort of got swept up in that. They were as popular as a band could be, and then all of a sudden, it was gone.
Yeah, actually, they were swept up by changing social times and changing political times, and it really wasn't their fault. They weren't a disco band, and they were kind of mad about that and frustrated and confused by what was happening. I mean, they were selling billions of albums, and still, on that front wave of super pop stardom that nobody had at that time, the globalness of it all, it was something that took them by surprise. And, they thought everybody would love them forever, and they found out it wasn't true.
Boy, it crashed really quickly, and one thing that Barry Gibb said in that documentary, or in an interview, Mike, where he defiantly turned to the TV camera and said, "Hey, we're not disco." I mean, they kept saying, and they really weren't. They were really their own music form. But the backlash was so bad, and also there was a part in there where radio stations, when Saturday Night Fever came out, DJs were by that point very constricted in what they could play, and they have to get 5 Bee Gees songs into a rotation in an hour, and there is a natural backlash to that after some point.
Well, Joe, the thing that struck me the most about watching the documentary, and it's great, it's entertaining and it's educational as well, is the span of eras that the Bee Gees covered. I mean, it had not occurred to me that their careers and their performances stretched out over so much time. And Frank, at one point, Barry Gibb says in the doc, we didn't always connect, but we stayed around. And they certainly did stay around. They're still around. We're talking about them. But the interconnection between the brothers, the strife between the brothers, the sadness of the Bee Gees, that's also part of the soul of this documentary.
Yeah, I thought it was really important to explore what kept them together, and I think it's really family. They had a loving family. They had a dream when they were kids in Australia. Their parents supported them. When you look at the Miami years, you see 50 people in that shot. It's all the families. They had their own families by then, but mom and dad were there. And when you think about it, brothers have ups and downs in life, and that's what broke them up and also kept them together. So when they had to gather around the Christmas tree every year, they realized, oh, you know, we were something, and we were more together than we are apart. And I think that love and that family commitment kept them together, and they overcame those obstacles that were there in those 5 decades. It is incredible, the fact that that longevity that they had over 5 decades and the impact it had on pop music.
Now let's talk about Miami and the studio, Criteria Studio, but also the inspiration for a song that really changed their sound that you talk about in the clip. Let's run it.
Driving backwards and forwards to Criteria, this clickety-click thing was going on in this bridge every time we crossed over it. And in my head, it sounded like and it was gone. And eventually, I started singing to it in my head.
I remember going to the studio, Eric said, can you do chicken picking, Alan? I didn't really know what it was. So I just played this one note and muted it. Thought it sounded like a chicken. And mixed with Barry's rhythm, it really worked, you know.
At that time, you know, only a handful of R&B artists were using synthesizers. So we went into this field, pioneering in a way.
It really was a completely new sound. I was explaining on Twitter this weekend what a nerd I was. I would stay inside on Saturdays and I'd listen to Casey Kasem and I'd write down the top 40. It was like my obsession. My family thought I was crazy, and they were right. But I remember Casey Kasem introducing Jive Talking one week and say, talk about a new sound. And it said, this is when you can tell disco is big, when the Bee Gees are getting involved. And of course, just a couple of years later, one of the most extraordinary, really, stories in pop music history, Saturday Night Fever, how that came about. And I must say, a couple things I didn't understand about that era. One was the loop, how they created the loop when they lost the drummer to a family sickness, which is an amazing story on staying alive. But the second, Stigwood needed songs. They send him a demo tape with 5 pop classics, a demo tape. Talk about that moment, because I don't know anybody that would get a demo tape of Staying Alive and Night Fever and How Deep Is Your Love and all the others, More Than a Woman, and not just be blown away. That is gold.
I know. I actually was kind of offended, Joe, because, you know, when I found out that Barry didn't even read the script, I thought, wow, how did you do that? Well, it turns out they were in the chateau in France, outside of Paris, and they were creating a new album, and they had these 5 songs in the drawer. And when Stigwood called them and said, I need some songs for a movie I'm doing, they just chose not to read the script and just delivered those songs to Bill Oakes at the label. And he went, oh my gosh, I have a soundtrack. And those are 5 songs that ended up in the top 10 for months. Just incredible.
Yeah. And finally, the title of the documentary, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart? A bittersweet title. Sweet because it was a huge hit in the early 70s for him, but bitter because of that moment at the end when Barry is talking and saying what he would give to have his brothers back with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the title of the movie really is 2 themes. One, it was the very first time that they mended their breakup when Barry invited Robin back and asked him to sing the first verse, and How Can You Mend a Broken Heart was born, and the Bee Gees were back. But for me, it really means that I'm hoping that talking about it and getting out and celebrating the legacy of the Bee Gees is something that will mend Barry's broken heart, because he does miss his brothers. And I'm hoping that he's back. Now, the music will last forever. And as you see in the end credits, he's been out performing. He was at Glastonbury and feeling that love. So I'm hoping that it accomplishes both things.
And at the end, Mika, of course, we saw the moving moment where he said he would give everything back, every song, every single, everything, just to be with his brothers again.
The new documentary, The Bee Gees, How Can You Mend a Broken Heart, is available now on demand. Frank Marshall, thank you so much for coming on the show this morning.